What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Health is Hard podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Matt Eichler, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and find the strategies that actually work for building a stronger, healthier, more resilient you. As a seasoned chiropractor, fitness junkie, and founder of Element X Health and Fitness, I've seen firsthand how confusing and overwhelming the health and fitness landscape can be. That's why I've made it my mission to simplify complex concepts, bust myths, and provide you with actionable tips you can start using today. Each week, we'll dive into topics like optimizing movement, building muscle, bouncing back from injuries, managing pain, managing your mindset, and so much more. Whether you're looking to level up your nutrition game, fine-tune your fitness routine, or just feel better in your own skin, Health is Hard is here for it. I'll do my best to make even the most challenging topics engaging and relatable. I'm hoping you'll be learning, laughing, and leveling up your health every episode. All right, let's dive in. Let the brain gains begin. Remember, the information/opinions provided in these podcasts/videos is/are for entertainment and educational purposes only, and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Health is Hard, episode 10. We're here. Another episode, another diet-related episode. But today we're going to kind of try to put a bow on this thing and wrap it up so we can move on to some other topics that are more my specialty. I just wanted to get a good little nutritional kind of master class out there so people can reference it and refer to it. And if I have new clients that are coming on, they can kind of get some more of my mindset around nutrition and really be able to absorb it by just having a reference guide that's just, something you can sit there and re-listen to. So tonight, the topic is the CC-Spish Diet, which is kind of the diet that I have come up with as far as it being the optimal situation for most people, but not optimal from a perspective of as good as it can get or as perfect as it can get, but mostly from a perspective of as sustainable as it can possibly be with the perfect intentions along the way, or somewhat perfect intentions along the way. So that's what we're shooting for. And I really feel like this is the diet that's going to make nutrition actually work for most people. Again, I'm always thinking effectiveness, efficiency, sustainability. Those three are my parameters that I'm trying to constantly revolve everything that I do around. So the CC-Spish diet stands for Calorie Conscious, Supplemented, Paleo-ish diet. Now, I've come up with 5 golden rules around nutrition that I've tried to weave into this approach. And I really believe that the CC-Spish diet embodies these 5 golden rules the best I can possibly come up with. So we're going to kind of break down each rule, and then I'm going to talk as we're going through each rule about how the CC-Spish diet embodies those rules. Okay? So first thing, here's the deal. Perfection doesn't exist. You've probably heard so many different diet pitches over the course of the last decade, 20 years or so. I mean, there's just been every different approach to trying to optimize body composition and live a long, healthy life through nutrition that you can possibly think of. I mean, there's been all kinds of crazy stuff. So the nutritional landscape, as far as the scientific literature, is still pretty young. It's not that old. You might think that, we've been understanding the world of nutrition for so long, but we really haven't. I mean, for the last 30, 40 years, it's really started to just kind of like increase as far as our knowledge, but we still don't know anything, if you ask me. We kind of understand enough to be effective, but there's still so much to learn. So don't get me wrong. This is not a one size fits all. This is not a end all be all. We're all still learning in this process, and nobody has the perfect answers, but I've tried to craft as good of one as I possibly can as far as kind of a dietary approach, not necessarily a hard, rigid diet, but just kind of some parameters and some principles that I think are going to guide you as best as you can be guided right now. And like I said, after these last few podcasts that I've done on nutrition, you're going to know more than your standard physician knows about nutrition. So let's go. So first thing, I'm going to use myself as an example because even though I consult and I advise people on dietary strategies day in and day out, I am nowhere near perfect, and I don't even want to be perfect. what I think is perfect in my head would be miserable as far as living day in and day out, especially in 2025, where, crazy amounts of horrible food is all around us. And not only is it horrible, it's deteriorating our health. However, it's delicious. And we all want to indulge every now and then, right? So that's the basis as to what we're going to be talking about tonight. How to make this work, how to make it not miserable, how to make it as ideal as possible, but also sustainable and doable. So here's the truth. Any diet that claims to be kind of the only way to do things, or a panacea, or like this utopia, is probably missing the point entirely, because everybody's different. Everybody's going to have their own preferences, their own habits, their own little nuances that get them in trouble, their own little vices. So we have to find some strategies that kind of can encompass everything and include everybody, but also gives you more these principles and guidelines instead of rigid guardrails that you need to stay within. That's kind of why I came up with this Calorie Conscious, supplemented, Paleo-ish. Ish is highly emphasized because paleo in this day and age is probably my favorite way to approach nutrition. However, in the modern landscape, it's nearly impossible to live and eat like our ancestors did 200, 500,000 years ago. Okay. It's just not feasible. Right. And, unless you want to be kind of this weirdo that stays at home and just neglects any of modern life's, indulgences, then it's probably not for you. But paleo-ish is. Okay. So I know it's a mouthful, but it works because it's working with real people. It gets real results and it deals with the real world. So following these 5 golden rules that I have laid out here tonight pretty much describe the CC-Spish diet, but also we're going to kind of go through those rules as we talk about the CC-Spish diet. But before we dive in, there's this really cool quote by Dave Asprey. Now, a lot of people hate on Dave Asprey because of some of his claims and whatnot. And I think he's great. I love his books. I've read almost all of them. He's the Bulletproof Coffee guy. He's the guy that kind of came up with Bulletproof Coffee, putting, butter in your coffee and exaggerating good, healthy fats instead of the processed carbohydrates. That's kind of his premise. And I think that's a pretty solid viewpoint. Of course, he has his limitations, and I definitely survey everybody's opinions, and he catches a lot of heat because of some of the things he claims. However, from his book, The Bulletproof Diet, there's a great quote, and he says, "The food you eat is merely a means to an end. That end is being a better parent, a more creative artist, a more effective professional, a more energetic teacher. It's about turning your human potential and spending more time in a state where stress isn't running the show and performance becomes effortless." I love that. I think that's a beautiful way to look at nutrition. And you'll see that one of my rules here is eat to live, not live to eat. And I think that quote really embodies that really well. But just think about that. Whether you're chasing weight loss or you're just using nutrition as a tool to be better at something, it really does affect every aspect of your life. And if you're focused on doing your best with your nutrition, you're going to be in a way better place than if you're just mindlessly consuming whatever's in front of you with hardly any background knowledge. Okay. So in this episode, we're going to break down, like I said, the 5 golden rules of nutrition that I've come up with, and they're my golden rules. They're not the golden rules. So don't take these as some sort of gospel or as if I know everything, because I don't, but I am the first to admit that. Okay. But trust me, after being in this world for 10, 15, maybe 20 years now, I have really learned a lot. I've always been a dot connector, and I always have kind of thought about nutrition and health as far as the big picture, and I have tried my best to not get lost in the nuances. I'm always talking about how modern science a lot of the time misses the forest for the trees. We focus on the nuances and we lose touch and we lose the sight of the bigger picture, and we lose people because so many people see some of these nuances that science may focus on as undoable or infeasible or just not matching modern society. So, as science catches up to what kind of some of this ancient wisdom and whatnot has already understood, we can try to pull from everything and keep it evidence-based, but also keep common sense in mind, and also just do our best and not have to strive for perfection, because perfection just simply doesn't exist, and you're never going to be able to be perfect. Okay. So I'm going to try to give you some real strategies that you can start using right away, and hope you understand how a lot of diets fail and how you can succeed. All right, we're going to dive in and make nutrition a little less hard for you tonight. Okay. So golden rule number 1 is you got to know, emphasize know, you got to know what you're eating. And this is hard. Okay, because there's so much stuff going on these days with food marketing and different gurus telling you to do this and do that, and you think you can just eat under this principle or this pattern and you're going to be fine. But then if you don't get into the technical details a little bit, you might miss the boat as far as some of the other specific nuances and parameters that actually move the needle. So but like I said, I am not perfect with my nutrition by any means. I mean, I would be like shredded. I'd have an 8-pack. I would just be like, but also I'd probably be miserable. So I like to indulge. I like to have some drinks every now and then. I like to eat some crappy food every now and then, maybe a little more than now and then. And, I have my vices and weaknesses too. So, but I've worked with a ton of clients. I've worked with a ton of patients. I'm always trying to fit those recommendations to the person I'm working with. So, but I'm also going to try to be as general as I can tonight, without making your head spin a little bit. Okay. So that being said, I'm not weighing my food all the time. I'm not tracking my macros to a T every day. I'm not scared of what they would call bad foods. I actually enjoy eating. I actually enjoy food. But I also benefit tremendously from the knowledge I've gained when it comes to just kind of intuitively eating, because I understand what's in what, and I understand some of the complexities of nutrition. So it really allows me to make better choices almost on a subconscious level. And that's where I feel like if people can get there, maybe not to the level that I'm at, but can at least take some of the things in these podcasts and improve upon, you're going to be in a way better place. And like I said, you're going to know more about nutrition than your standard medical physician does. And I say that completely with 100% confidence, because it's bad out there. But yeah, how did I get here? I've done years of like tracking food here and there. I've done years of, I've done multiple bodybuilding shows. Men's Physique is what I did multiple times. I did 3 or 4 shows. Haven't done one since like 2017, 2018. But, in that process, you learn a ton. You learn how to optimize your body composition, but you also learn what's doable, what's not doable, especially long term. Okay. So lots of trial and error. I've come up short. I've failed many times. I've hit roadblocks. I've hit all kinds of stuff where I'm like, that is just not doable specifically, and there's just been countless learning opportunities for me. So trust me, I have some wisdom that I can pass along. One of the main things I've learned is getting very specific and strict about your nutrition every now and then brings a lot of awareness to the game here. And that is the key, awareness. And that's really what we're focusing on here. So you got to know what you're eating. That's the first golden rule. And you learn how to get flexible and have some sustainable strategies put in place, and you learn all that stuff, but you have to have somewhat of a framework to work from. So that's how I've come up with the CC-Spish diet, right? Calorie conscious, not obsessed, supplemented where you need it, right? Certain supplements are almost essential these days because the food is just such bad quality, and you're just not getting the appropriate vitamins, minerals, micronutrients out of your food most of the time. Paleo-ish, because I think that's a good premise to try to live by. And paleo is basically just kick out all the modern processed foods. That's a huge win right there. If you can try to minimize those, you don't have to completely eradicate them, but if you can minimize them, you're going to be in a much better spot. But the bottom line of the diet here is that it's not about restriction. It's about freedom through knowledge. And it's about making nutrition work for you, not against you, by making slightly better choices because of the almost subconscious knowledge set that you have. We're going to break it down, okay? The truth about calories. All right. Calories do govern any kind of weight management strategy. Calories in versus calories out. That is the umbrella governing structure. We've talked about it a lot in the previous podcasts, but you can't get around that. And no matter what, you hear a guru online say, oh, we need to not worry about counting calories. That is your foundation. Understanding the energy balance equation is the only way to get you where you want to go, whether it's weight loss or muscle and weight gain. Okay. The calorie situation is going to be important. And this caloric awareness of where you're at is key. You have to figure this out, or else you just will spin your wheels and you'll be kind of like shooting in the dark because you just don't know where you're at. The big problem with most people is that when they think about their calorie situation, they underestimate it significantly. Most people don't even understand how much they're eating. And there's a study that actually shows that most people underestimate their calorie intake by about 47%, about 50%. And that's a big problem, because if you're underestimating how many calories you're bringing in, you're definitely not hitting a calorie deficit a lot of the time. And that's what's actually going to sustainably get weight off of you. And if you're not in a deficit, you're not going to lose weight. It's as simple as that. And people are mostly doing this out of ignorance. And I know that sounds bad, but they just have no reference point. And if you have no reference point, you have zero awareness of portions, of what's in what, and you're just not going to have any kind of serious, manageable parameters or principles that you can manipulate to actually get where you want to go. Basically, that adage of what gets measured gets managed completely applies in the world of nutrition.
Hey, it's Dr. Matt. Are you looking to make some moves towards better health and fitness and do so in an effective, efficient, and sustainable way? I'm excited to introduce to you Element X Personal Transformations, my premium online fitness coaching program designed to help you crush whatever fitness goals you may have, whether it's slapping on some muscle, building some strength, actually losing that stubborn body fat that keeps coming and going, recover from a nagging injury, or all the above. Now, what sets the EXPT program apart is its personalized approach. You'll start with a 3-call intro process with me, Dr. Matt, personally, each lasting 30 to 45 minutes. During these calls, we'll dive deep into your unique needs, preferences, goals, and whatever else you want to talk about to create a customized fitness situation that's perfect for you. No more guesswork. No more one-size-fits-all approaches. With EXPT, you'll receive expert guidance, support, and accountability every step of the way. I've done my best to create a program that puts a chiropractor, physical therapist, and personal trainer in your pocket, or at least on standby. We'll work together to optimize your nutrition, training, recovery, and mindset to help you achieve sustainable, life-changing results. So if you're ready to do all that, head to the link in the description, complete the quick 5-minute coaching application. Not everybody's a candidate, but this quick application gives me all the details to let you know up front if it's a match or not. But don't wait, spots are filling up, and I can only handle so many clients at a time because of the detailed, personalized approach. So I hope to chat with you soon.
So we got to build awareness, and knowing what you're eating is the first topic here. You got to learn your patterns of eating. You got to understand portions. You got to understand your blind spots, your unique little tendencies and habits, and figure out where you can make some improvements. All right. But if you're going to track your calories, you got to understand that that's just a tool. It's not a lifestyle. It's not about being guilty about doing this or doing that. And it's not something you probably need to do forever. But once you learn some of the basics of what tracking your food can teach you, you will have so much more freedom later in life when you can look at something and understand kind of intuitively what's in what and what to stay away from and what to limit and what to, indulge in certain times, but then also get back on track when you need to. So like I said, knowing what you're eating, calories is one part of knowing what's in what and understanding how much you're eating as far as the quantity. But then when it comes to the quality of the foods too, people get lost in that as well, because when it comes to the quality of food, sometimes you have no idea what's good quality, what's bad quality. And good and bad might be terms that we don't really want to use, but at the same time, generally there's certain foods and whatnot that are probably going to be not so good for your goals, and then there's foods that will be much better. So when you're tracking your food specifically, we're going to talk about some more of the strategies here. You're going to learn a lot of things, and one of the things you'll learn is just all these little hidden calorie sources. There's these little nutritional landmines that tracking teaches you to avoid. And when you go through something like a pretty significant like calorie deficit for a prolonged amount of time, let's say you're prepping for like a show or a photo shoot, or you're trying to lose some weight for a cruise or a wedding or something, these things really teach you a lot. And at the end here, we're going to talk about, why I think it's a good strategy to do that every now and then. But one of the things is you're really going to learn is that healthy food, specifically the healthy food marketing world, is just riddled with all kinds of BS. Marketing often masks all kinds of things like caloric density, and it really intentionally tricks you a lot of the time because they're just trying to sell food. And there's all kinds of issues with that. And I'm really excited about this new administration because I think that they're actually going to make some changes in that world that would be hugely positive for the health of this country. But we're not going to get into politics, okay? So, but there's a research study in Public Health and Nutrition, it's Rayner et al., 2013, that shows how health halos trick our perception. Now, health halos are kind of like these claims about health foods that really just get food selling, get food flying off the shelf, but sometimes that food's not healthy at all. All right. You can see foods labeled as like healthy or natural or organic, and your brain automatically kind of assumes that it's good for weight loss. And a lot of times that's not the case. And a lot of times that leads to you over consuming those foods, thinking that they're healthy, but sometimes they're not nearly as healthy as they may claim they are. And sometimes when you start to understand calories and the breakdown of that, you really can get this perspective of like what's actually healthy, or healthy maybe is not even the best term. It's more like, contextually beneficial for your specific situation at that moment. But yeah, like some real world examples, like organic cookies. How funny is that, right? It's an organic cookie, so it's better, but it's still a cookie. You know what I mean? Like the breakdown of what's in a cookie is still not going to be good, right? A natural granola. Sometimes natural is claimed by so many different food products. It can still be super calorie dense and still have a bunch of crap ingredients, but they're technically maybe more natural than the next super processed food. But natural really means almost nothing. It's just kind of one of those marketing terms. Sugar-free is another thing. You'll see sugar-free a lot of the times. Well, when you see sugar-free, a lot of times you'll see higher fat. And higher fat is super calorically dense. Fat has 9 calories per gram. And if you pull out some sugar and just put fat in, well, now maybe you've almost got like a net exact same caloric situation, or maybe even more calories because of the fat. Gluten-free. Gluten-free is another one. People think gluten-free, okay, cool. I have problems with gluten, so I can just go ham on gluten-free stuff. But the gluten-free stuff a lot of times has all kinds of processed garbage in it as well. So you got to be careful with some of these traps, okay? Smoothie bowls, things like smoothie bowls, sometimes, they technically are healthy. They're better food choices like acai bowls and those kind of things. But sometimes they can hit 800, 900, 1,000 calories. And it's like you might as well have sat down and had some fast food. When you think about the calorie situation, they're loaded with fruit sugars a lot of the times, multiple servings of like fruits and nuts and those kind of things. So you've got carbs and fats and minimal protein, and it's just not a good situation. Sometimes they'll add like honey or agave syrup, and that's another calorie dense situation. Now, honey's much better than a whole lot of other carbohydrate choices, but it's still going to be calories. It's still going to be sugar at the end of the day. So things like protein bars, sometimes you'll see like 20 grams of protein on a certain bar, but then you got to look and see, oh gosh, this has 48 grams of carbohydrate too. It's like it's a protein bar, but it's also a protein and 50 grams of carbohydrates as well. I don't even care where the carbs come from. That's still a ton of carb. All right. Natural ingredients is another thing you'll see in a lot of protein bars, but it could be like brown rice syrup or another kind of sugar that's a natural kind of sugar that's still going to somewhat react the exact same way in your body. You can see things like perfect post-workout meal and those kind of things. And it could be like a candy bar, right? It could be like protein and just straight sugar and some processed fats and those kind of things. A lot of times you'll see protein bars that are 300, 400 calories. And that's the same as eating a candy bar. Sure, you're getting a little bit of protein, better than not getting the protein, but it's a candy bar. And again, like I said, natural products, natural means almost nothing legally. There's no specific FDA or regulation that has to happen with a natural claim. It's pure marketing. There's zero guarantee of any health benefits. It's often more processed than even regular foods or stuff that doesn't claim it's natural. Trail mix is another thing that people think is usually going to be primarily healthy, but sometimes it's just extremely calorie dense. It might be natural. It might be a bunch of fruits and nuts and seeds and dried fruits and all this kind of stuff, but it's usually super calorie dense. So people will just be hammering trail mix and their calorie situation is just through the roof. Why can't I lose weight? Well, you have good intentions. You have good intentions, but still the food choices are not good, right? But it's just because you've been tricked by the marketing. Salads. This is another one. This one drives me crazy. People go to a restaurant and get a salad, and they don't realize that the salad has more calories than one of the entrees. You know, especially when you add in all the stuff they throw on there, salad dressings and all these things, nuts, seeds, cheese, dried fruits, croutons, those kind of things. There's just tons of calories in some of these salads. All right. So some of the fixes here, you know, question healthy labels all the time. You have to become a bit of a label dissector and be able to understand how to read nutrition facts, understand what's what. You know, you have to look at portions. You have to really be conscious of healthy foods. One of the books I read early in my career, I think I've talked about it plenty in previous podcasts, was called In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan. Fantastic book. Awesome book about just food marketing and food substances versus actual real food, and how we've gotten so lost in these nuances of science, of understanding carbs and fats and proteins and phytonutrients and omega-3s and all these different components of food, but we've kind of almost lost our way when it comes to just eating better food. Another thing to look out for is this liquid calorie deception. You know, beverages have a whole lot of empty calories in them. You know, a lot of times in a liquid form, you don't even realize you're getting those calories in. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition demonstrates how liquid calories bypass certain satiety mechanisms. You know, you got to think about how when you just bring liquid calories in, how it almost bypasses your body even thinking that it's gotten calories because they're in a liquid format. So it's just, you don't feel full, you don't get those satiety signals. You got to be careful with things like that. You know, juices are not free calories. Yeah, like they're not free calories and they're not free of calories by any means. You know, apple juice, orange juice, those kind of things. When people say that they're trying to drink a bunch of orange juice to get vitamin C, I'm like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because you're just getting a ton of sugar. Just get a vitamin C supplement, right? Take the vitamin C supplement. Don't worry about the dang orange juice, okay? I'm not saying orange juice is terrible. I drink a little bit of orange juice from time to time, but you also have to understand that orange juice is going to have a decent amount of calories per serving because there's a ton of sugar in it. I use orange juice sometimes as a pre-workout drink. I'll throw my pre-workout in with the orange juice because I want some calories before I go to the gym. I usually don't eat much before I go to the gym, so I want a little bit of, you know, simple sugars before I get into the gym and start using those immediately. Coffee creamers. You got to be careful with coffee creamers. Those sometimes have tons of calories in them, and people are like, oh yeah, that's a serving. Oh yeah, that's a serving. And they end up putting 3 or 4 servings in their coffee. Now you just ruined the idea of having a somewhat low calorie coffee or something because you just dumped a ton of calories in there. And even 0 calorie stuff. You know, there's a research study that came out not long ago. I don't know the details of it because I haven't really read through it much, but I saw that it affects your insulin resistance. And for the longest time, we thought that a lot of I think it was sucralose specifically, or Splenda. I think for the longest time, we thought, hey, those are kind of almost a free ride. And for the longest time, we're not 100% sure what the nuances of detriment they could possibly be creating or ill health effects, because they haven't really shown in much literature to have many ill effects besides some slight microbiome manipulation. So therefore, a lot of the evidence-based gurus think they're kind of a free ride. I've always kind of hesitated a little bit. I do consume a fair amount of those day to day, but I have always understood that some of these chemical sweeteners, especially in an abundance over time, is probably not great. And we need to try to limit those, or at least have a mechanism by which we somewhat are trying to detox those. And I've come up with some solutions for that kind of stuff too. Another little blind spot, cooking oils. We've talked about these already, but a tablespoon of olive oil has like 120 calories. It's still primarily fat, and fat is very calorie dense. So you have to be really careful with your oil consumption, you know, especially when you're cooking and whatnot. When people cook with oils, a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, a tablespoon. And then it's like 4 tablespoons. And then that gets cooked into your food. And then you don't realize that you're consuming those oils and those calories with your food. So people get really, in trouble there too. And people put butter on everything and they think, oh, whatever, that doesn't count. Nope, it does. And it shows up. And then people have snack amnesia. These little unconscious bites and licks and little add-ons and chip here, chip there, and just a handful of this, a handful of that. And they forget to like even account for that. And that's where a lot of these extra calories show up. And that's why we underestimate calories by 47-50%. Okay. It's because we don't think about these things. So one little quick helpful tool here I have is like a little quick measuring guide here, and you can just use your hand. Okay, so your thumb, about the size of the tip of your thumb, that's typically about a tablespoon of oil. Okay, so about the size of your thumb, maybe a little bit bigger if you're a smaller person, maybe a little bit smaller if you're a bigger person, but that's about a tablespoon of oil. Another one is your palm. Okay, so if you look at your palm, that's about a decent size serving of like protein. Okay, so if you're eating some protein, let's say some chicken or some beef or, a burger or something like that, the size of your palm is usually about a full protein serving, if not even more. Your fist is a good measuring tool for the amount of veggies you should be getting in per meal or per serving. Okay, so your whole fist. And then a cupped hand, a lot of times your cupped hand is a good measurement for about a carbohydrate serving. So like some rice or some noodles or those kind or, potatoes, those kind of things. That's about a full carbohydrate serving most of the time. And those can vary between what source it is. So that's just kind of a rough measurement, so if you're just at a cookout or, a little potluck or something, that's a good idea to think, okay, that's at least a serving of protein, of carbohydrate or whatever you're eating. But when you're trying to gain some awareness as far as what you're actually eating, you're trying to know what you're eating, the golden rule, label reading becomes almost a requirement. You have to understand what you're looking at. Okay. There's multiple names for sugars. You have to understand what's in what. There's all kinds of serving size tricks that are happening with certain foods. Sometimes you'll see, low calorie this, that, and then you look at the serving size and you're like, oh my gosh, that's nothing. Of course, that's low calorie. But health claims in general are something you have to just have a little bit of pause and think about and be like, oh, okay, I'm not sure if that's completely, what's being marketed to me. All right. And there's all kinds of hidden oils and stuff too. You just have to learn how to read ingredients lists. And I'm not going to go deep into that tonight, but you'll catch a few things here. Okay. So label reading 101. Let's go into a quick couple things you want to look at. Like I said, serving size, how many servings are in the container? What's a serving actually look like? Multiple servings in a single serve package. Like you think about like an energy drink. A lot of times those energy drinks have 2 servings in them and you drink the whole thing and that can has 2 servings, right? So some people are like, why is my heart going crazy? It's like, well, you drank 2 servings of something that said it had 250 milligrams of caffeine. Okay. You got almost 500 milligrams of caffeine in that dang can. I know not many cans go that high with caffeine, but you got to just be careful with those kind of things. Learn how to do some quick math and look at serving sizes. Learn how to spot different sugars. You got things like high fructose corn syrup, anything ending in ose, like dextrose, maltose, those kind of things. Anything ending in syrup or a certain syrup, that's going to be straight sugar for the most part. Anything with juice concentrate is also going to be somewhat straight sugar. There's multiple sugar names. They're splitting them up to kind of hide them. Right. So they might have 3 or 4 different sugars in there to kind of hide the fact that there's a decent amount of sugar in there. Then you have to be kind of a fat detective too. All kinds of oils are in everything. Soybean oil, cottonseed oil, canola oil, those kind of things are just in so many things. And those are somewhat modified ingredients. They're added in to processed foods, vegetable oils in general. Anything hydrogenated is going to have pretty much the industrial seed oils that are not going to help you much at all. Okay. Now, like I said, these are things that you don't need to be scared of or completely avoid. But at the same time, you got to be mindful. You got to have some awareness. You got to know what you're eating. Quick check system when you're looking at a food label is just always look at the serving size. Scan the first 3 to 5 ingredients. That ingredients list underneath the nutrition label, the ingredients list is always going to be listed from highest abundance to lowest abundance. That's somewhat of a rule that has to be in place. Look at protein to fat ratio when you're reading labels. I always look at that right away. Protein to fat. If something is crazy amount more fat than it is protein, I put it back immediately. One of the best examples of this is I love buying those prepackaged burgers sometimes. Publix has like a prepackaged, I think it's Bubba has grass-fed burgers. Of course, that's all marketing. Who knows if they're actually grass-fed or legitimately grass-fed. But I always look at the protein to fat. And usually I'll see those burgers are like 34 grams of fat to 22 grams of protein. Now, of course, when you cook them, you're going to cook some of that fat out. But if it's like 48 to 20, it's like, okay, I'm good. Nope, I'm good on that. All right. Because that's just a calorie bomb that I don't need. But also keep in mind certain ratios as well. Like I always look protein to fat, and then sometimes I glance over at the carbs. And if it's more of a protein and fat type of food, most of the time it's not going to have many carbs. But some foods have all 3, and you're like, oh shoot, that's a calorie bomb. But check total calories too. Check overall total calories. So first thing I do when I look at a label, calories, protein to fat, carbohydrates, ingredients list. Every time I look at that. Every time I look at it, I'm looking at that. In certain foods, I expect, like, if you pull up, you grab a bag of pasta or something, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm expecting this to be all carbohydrates, maybe a little bit of protein, but I'm not expecting much fat. Right. And when I see the fat is high, I'm like, okay, this is already pre-cooked in a bunch of oils and stuff. And I'm like, I'm good on that. But tracking is the key to understanding what you're eating. right? And you don't need to do this forever, but if you do it for a brief time period, it's really helpful to start to gain an understanding. I have plenty of clients that I've had just track for a few weeks, and they learned pretty much everything they needed to learn. They were able to make better choices. They were able to be a little bit more self-aware, and they were able to make significant positive changes just from that. So it's really helpful. It can be annoying, but it's really helpful. But luckily, in 2025, we have all kinds of digital apps and whatnot that we can leverage to help us track our food. And some of those are Carbon is probably my favorite. Okay, that was developed by Lane Norton and a couple other people. He uses a science-based approach. It's kind of like a MyFitnessPal. Most people have heard of MyFitnessPal, but he actually has a built-in system where it's got to be some sort of algorithm that helps you kind of manipulate those calories as you go along to help you achieve a certain specific goal. And it's really a great app for sure, especially if you have any kind of body composition goals, like you want to lose some body fat or you want to gain some muscle mass, or you just want to kind of maintain where you're at and not put any body fat on, that kind of thing. It's great. But the second one's MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal is probably the most popular one. Almost everybody has this on their phone. Has a huge food database. You can scan stuff right away and you can see stuff pop up. Again, the foods that you can scan are probably the foods you don't want to really be eating that much, but you can also type in like, hey, your average, medium-sized banana, or, a medium-sized apple, or, a cup of brown rice or a cup of white rice or something like that. It's great for that. Okay. And most of my clients use MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal's gotten kind of tricky with some of their stuff. You have to exit out of some of their stuff because they try to encourage you to buy their pro version, where it's a certain subscription per month, as far as a payment per month. But you can get around that if you just can click off of some of the ads that pop up. You can still use a lot of the features of MyFitnessPal completely for free. Another one's called Lose It. Another one's called Chronometer. Chronometer actually focuses on micronutrients. So not just your macronutrients as much. And some of these other ones do list the micronutrients, like your vitamins and minerals and sodium and all those kind of things. But Chronometer specifically helps you focus on your micronutrients and making sure that you're getting, optimal doses of the micronutrients that you need, which are primarily vitamins and minerals for the most part. But yeah, so if you just want a quick comparison, like beginner friendly, MyFitnessPal. For more performance based stuff, if you have specific goals and you don't want to hire a coach or something, Carbon has almost like a built-in coaching system in there that allows you to kind of self-manipulate some of your stuff, and it does it for you according to your goals, like allows you to track, but you have to be consistent with what you're putting in there. Okay. If you're not consistent, it's not going to know how to coach you, so it's definitely not as good as a regular coach. But at the same time, if you're going to be more honest with an app than you are with a coach, then maybe that's the track for you for sure. If you're more health focused and you want to, really nail down on some of the nuances of the micronutrients you're getting in, then Chronometer is awesome. We'll talk a little bit more about tracking, like a tracking strategy, but a lot of times 1 to 2 weeks of consistent tracking of just everything that goes in your mouth is going to give you a ton of data. It's going to give you a ton of information. It's going to make you learn a lot too. It's going to teach you what's happening, but you have to be very diligent and disciplined and just make it happen. If you can track your calories and also your weight at the same time, you can see some patterns as to what's happening, then you already know what you need to do. If you're gaining weight, you're in a calorie surplus. If you're losing weight, you're in a calorie deficit. So if you're staying the same, then you're probably right around your maintenance calories. This isn't rocket science. It just requires discipline. It's simple, but it's not easy. Key takeaways from this first rule here. Solid nutrition is not about perfection, but you have to understand what's going in your body, right? It's about developing awareness, but also having more of an understanding, not only of yourself and your self-awareness, but the awareness of what's in what. So it's huge to actually know what you're eating. That's a huge first step. Okay. We're going to move on to golden rule number 2. Golden rule number 2 is eat to live, don't live to eat. So food communicates with your body. Every bite communicates directly with your cellular machinery, your cells, and they influence things like genetic expression, hormone balance, immune function, cognitive performance, and just your emotional well-being, everything. So if you look more at food as like your daily nutritional medicine, you're going to look at each meal as an opportunity to heal, and more nutrients equals more health. And nutrients are little information packets that help you become better at something. And the quality of the food you eat tends to change, and the quantity of food starts to get manipulated a little bit. And we got to get more empowered when it comes to food. We don't need to be fearful. We need to be more optimistic and just look at it as more of a tool to live a long, happy, healthy life life, as opposed to letting our quality of life just deteriorate as we think it's normal to do so. Now, sure, aging comes with some deterioration for sure, but a lot of times if you're handling your lifestyle to a certain degree and optimizing certain things, aging can be very different for a whole host of different people according to how they live. So choose wisely, eat intentionally, live fully. All right. Golden rule number 3, we need to eat food, not too much, mostly protein. So that's a play on Michael Pollan's eat food, not too much, mostly plants is what he came up with. And that's from his book, In Defense of Food. And it's just like a little hard-hitting little one-liner. But when he says food, he means food. He means you got to understand what food is versus some of this processed garbage. He calls it edible food-like substances in his book. So that's where we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of the CC-Spish diet. The CC-Spish diet, like I said, calorie conscious, supplemented, Paleo-ish. It's going to focus on nutrient density. We want nutrient dense foods. We eat way too many calorie dense foods that are nutrient scarce. We need to focus on nutrient density. So a nutrient dense food is a food that's probably lower calorie, but has an abundance of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, enzymes, and phytonutrients, and those kind of things. Usually has better bioavailability, and your body can assimilate and deal with it, basically break it down better. So nutrient dense foods are the way to go. In the CC-Spish diet and in the paleo diet in general, they focus on nutrient dense foods and minimizing the processed foods. I went ahead and just kind of created a little hierarchy here. Now I'm going to go through some foods to eat liberally, eat in moderation, and then to limit. Okay. So if you want to try to adhere to the CC-Spish diet at all, you want to eat liberally, non-starchy vegetables, high quality proteins, and healthy fats. So non-starchy vegetables are typically lower calorie. They're typically nutrient dense powerhouses. Okay. Some key examples are spinach, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, peppers, asparagus, of course, all the things that nobody likes. But if you can start getting those more in your system, you're going to find all kinds of benefits like higher fiber for digestion and satiety. They're going to be rich in minerals and antioxidants, which are helpful for your health and making sure you're not having any deficiencies, and helping also detox certain toxicities and different toxic nutrients that, or pollution and, byproducts and those kind of things. And they help stabilize your blood sugar. They help keep you in kind of a more level place when it comes to that kind of thing. So non-starchy vegetables are huge. Next, protein, high quality proteins, right? There's kind of a protein hierarchy here. And I would say top tier proteins, whenever it's possible or whenever your budget permits it, wild caught fish, they're going to be higher in omega-3s. They're going to have lower toxins like mercury and those kind of things. They're going to have a better fatty acid profile. Okay, so wild caught fish are great for those kind of things. Grass-fed beef, grass-fed, grass-finished beef is going to have more CLA, which is conjugated linolenic acid, which is also a beneficial fatty acid that our bodies need. And there's a lot of other benefits to it. Some bodybuilders are really high on CLA, but grass-fed beef is also going to have better omega-3 ratio. We know from previous podcasts and from just usually a general understanding these days that the omega-6, the omega-3 ratio is crazy. And we consume way more omega-6s than we do omega-3s. And that leads to some inflammation and some dysregulation in our bodies. So that's going to be super helpful if we can get more omega-3s. Typically grass-fed, grass-finished beef is going to just be more nutrient dense. Now, there's macronutrients and there's micronutrients, right? A lot of times, no matter what kind of beef it is, it's going to have similar macronutrients, but it's the micronutrients that are much different not much different, but somewhat significantly different between grass-fed and like grain-fed or different quality beefs and whatnot. Then we got like pasture-raised chicken or eggs. Okay, pasture-raised is usually what you want to look for. Cage-free typically doesn't mean anything. Free range typically doesn't mean anything. You really want to find pasture-raised chicken or egg. So those are like the top tier options for proteins. Some solid options still to be eating on a regular basis are just conventional lean meats. Farm-raised fish is okay, but you want to be careful with some of the different kinds, specifically salmon, because it's super high in fat. Regular eggs, a quality protein powder, organic tofu or tempeh. But we also got some budget-friendly protein hacks here, like canned fish, rotisserie chicken, eggs, just any egg specifically, doesn't matter what kind. Some are better than others, but, eggs are eggs for the most part. Whey protein, ground turkey, and some of the key benefits to the higher quality are just going to be better nutrient profiles, fewer additives and processed junk that gets injected into these meats and stuff sometimes, more omega-3s, and less environmental toxins. You're better off going with the higher tier there. But again, protein is just one of those macronutrients that's just so important to get in that if you're getting protein in from even these lower tiers, hey, good on you. Okay, still foods to be eating liberally, okay? Healthy fats, but gotta be careful with your calories with fats. Fats are fantastic for hormone production, brain health. They're essential for hormone synthesis, cell membrane integrity, nutrient absorption, cognitive function, all these kind of things. Some of the best sources of fats are extra virgin olive oil, avocados, nuts like almonds, walnuts, macadamia, seeds, chia, flax, pumpkin, fatty fishes, coconut oil in moderation because it's easy to go overboard with some of these oils, grass-fed butter or ghee butter specifically. Again, easy to go overboard. If you're cooking your food and some of the stuff, you got to be really careful with the serving size. You can't just be like, oh, it's a good fat, so I'm just going to go ham, right? I'm just going to go crazy. Calories can be part of the equation. And like I said, calories are always the governing process, the governing structure that we want to make sure. If we're over consuming super healthy foods, which is kind of hard to do, which goes back to the whole idea, if you're eating better quality foods, you're not going to eat as much quantity. But if you're still eating a ton of quantity, if you're still eating a ton of calories, you're getting this overconsumption and this caloric surplus, well, then you're going to put on body fat, and then you're going to have issues because of the excess body fat, right? Body composition kind of is the ruler of the road here. The better the body composition, the better your health's going to be for the most part. Of course, there's one-off scenarios and different weird situations. And, I don't like to speak in generalizations, but sometimes they come out, and a lot of times better body composition profile, more muscle, less body fat, those people are going to be more healthy than the people that have less muscle and a ton of body fat. So those are the foods you want to go ahead and try to eat liberally, but of course, liberally means still calorie conscious, okay? But foods to only eat in moderation here would be starchy vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and dairy if you tolerate it, okay? So starchy vegetables are more like your potatoes and your roots and tubers and those kind of things. Sweet potatoes, butternut squash, pumpkin, parsnips, corn, those kind of things. Those are all going to have a lot of nutrients, and they're going to be very good for certain things, but they also can be kind of calorie dense. So you want to be kind of careful with those. Sweet potatoes specifically, super rich in vitamin A, potassium, fiber. Pumpkin packed with beta carotene. Corn has certain B vitamins and some protein a lot of times. But portion control is huge here. You want to be careful with like maybe a quarter to a half a cup per meal, and not trying to go too crazy overboard, because a lot of times these kind of carbohydrates are easy to overconsume. I can pound potatoes. You got to be careful with your portions here. And same thing with whole grains, okay? A lot of times whole grains are super easy to consume. There are some benefits to whole grains if you deal well with them. Some people with celiac disease and gluten issues and sensitivities, you want to be careful, but there's a lot of micronutrients in whole grains. A lot of times they help you with sustained energy. They have fiber for digestive health, essential minerals like magnesium and zinc and stuff. Sometimes the gluten can play, or the phytates in certain whole grains can kind of negate some of that, but don't worry about that. It's another discussion. B vitamins though, usually whole grains are packed with B vitamins, which helps support your metabolism. A lot of times the best whole grain options though are things like brown rice or white rice. Quinoa is another one. Complete protein has all the different essential amino acids. However, people can kind of get tricked by that because they think it's high protein and they don't look at the carbohydrate, right? So sure, quinoa has a decent amount of protein. It's not a ton. It's not much. Per serving, it might be like, 8 or 9 grams, as opposed to probably 35 or 40 grams of carbohydrate, maybe even more than that. Okay, it's more of a carbohydrate specifically, but it is one of the better ones, probably the best one if you're going to have some sort of, rice type dish. Okay, but brown rice, white rice, not terrible. It's easy to overconsume. When you think about a serving of rice, I usually think about a cup of rice, and I'm like, well, I've got 3 cups on my plate here. I make some dish where you got some chicken or something and some chicken sauteed, and then you pour it over some rice, and then you realize, okay, I poured it over rice. Rice is a little bit better than maybe like some French fries or something, right? Of course, but at the same time, that's a ton of rice. That's probably like 3 or 4 servings of rice. So it's easy to overconsume rice. Be careful with that. All right. You also have to be really mindful of certain considerations, blood sugar sensitivities, autoimmune conditions, celiac, gluten sensitivities, digestive issues, low carbohydrate type living. It's easy to really go overboard with your carbohydrates with some of these whole grains. Okay. Legumes are nutrient dense plant proteins. Okay. And they have certain beneficial properties, but usually like your lentils, black beans, chickpeas, edamame, kidney beans, those kind of things, they're a pretty solid plant-based protein. They're a great source of fiber. They contain a lot of essential minerals and whatnot, usually somewhat low in fat, but they're usually somewhat high in carbohydrate. A lot of times people look at them as like proteins, but they're pretty high in carbohydrate too. Okay, but some of the top legume choices, lentils, they're quick to cook, they're easy to cook. Black beans, they're rich in antioxidants. They have a lot of different antioxidants in there. Chickpeas, they're versatile. They help support digestive health. Edamame is a complete protein, even though it's soy. It's basically a soybean. And then kidney beans are super high in fiber. So some of those things have their benefits. Dairy. If you tolerate dairy, there's a lot of benefits from certain dairy, especially for like full fat yogurts and full fat milks and those kind of things. They can be really helpful. So a lot of times they're pretty loaded with vitamin D. Sometimes if they're fortified, you got to be careful with that too, because fortification, I think, is a bit of a mystery as far as if it's actually beneficial or not. We talked about that in a previous podcast too. Probiotics in a lot of like the fermented dairy, super helpful, like Greek yogurts and kefir and those kind of things. Cottage cheese is a great situation. It's a lower fat, higher protein option. Certain cheeses can be okay, can be great, can be fine. Grass-fed butter, fantastic. Has a decent, amount of beneficial fatty acids. There's a lot of different things, for people that can't tolerate dairy. There's lactose-free milks now. There's nut-based milks like almond, coconut, goat and sheep milk products, nutritional yeast for B vitamins and stuff. So there's a lot of options there. Okay, so dairy is one of those things you want to eat in moderation, though, specifically, especially if you're trying to adhere to the CC-Spish diet a little bit. So now we're going to go on to some foods to try to significantly minimize. Now, of course, when we go paleo-ish, we go calorie conscious. We're kind of flexible with what we're eating. We're not super rigid. There's no hard guardrails, but these are the things you want to try to minimize on this diet. Okay. So any kind of processed foods, most characteristics of different processed foods, you'll have it manufactured with just multiple ingredients. It's usually got a huge ingredient list. Usually has artificial preservatives, colors, flavors, those kind of things, typically high in added sugars, unhealthy fats, processed seed oils, and sodium. Okay, there's usually just a ton of that stuff in there. A lot of times they're somewhat stripped of their natural nutrients because of the processing. That's just defeating the purpose of consuming them. Common examples, packaged snack cakes and cookies, frozen microwave meals, processed meats, hot dogs, bologna, most deli meats even, sugary breakfast cereals, no good, instant noodles or packaged ramen, those kind of things. Commercially produced baked goods, like if you go to like a Publix or a Costco or something, or Walmart, and you go to the baked goods section where you're like, ooh, there's some home cooked meals, right? And you just pop them in the microwave or the oven or something. Those are usually loaded with processed ingredients. Chips, cookies, crackers, those kind of things. That's all, anything pre-packaged is typically going to be highly processed, right? Health risks of processed foods. We've got increased inflammation, disrupted gut microbiome, higher risk of chronic diseases, potential metabolic dysfunction from these kind of things because of the ramifications, nutrient deficiencies, weight gain and obesity, and all these things, okay? You want to somewhat stay away from the processed foods. And then also the next category here, refined sugars. We've talked a ton about refined sugars. Just try to stay away from sugar as much as you can. Some here and there, like I said, when you're trying to indulge and have a good time, no big deal. But there's just so many different kinds of refined sugars. You got white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, even artificial sweeteners sometimes are kind of combined with other sugars. Like you'll see stevia sometimes combined with dextrose. I know stevia in the raw, specifically one of them that I get from now and then, I'm like, this has a gram of dextrose in every stevia packet. Like, what's the purpose of getting this? Processed honey, you want to stick with more raw and unfiltered honey. Local raw honeys and whatnot are much better. Maple syrup, got to be careful with maple syrup. Some maple syrups have some certain health benefits for sure, but of course, if you overdo it, overconsume, insulin's going to go crazy. It's a processed food. It's a syrup. It's just going to be super abundant in sugar. So you got to be careful with that. It's going to have those things are going to have all kinds of metabolic impacts, create chaos for your pancreas and insulin and your insulin receptors over time. And you just want to be really careful with those. Okay. Next category, industrial seed oils. Okay. We've talked a lot about seed oils. They get a bad rep. I think maybe it's overdone with the bad rep, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. I think that you want to try to avoid them. They're usually in most of the processed foods. They're usually in, all kinds of stuff, but things like canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower, safflower, cottonseed, grapeseed oils. They're just super high in omega-6s, which makes them kind of inherently inflammatory. And the inflammatory nature to them, not only is it inflammatory because of the chemical makeup, but also because of the calorie density, right? They're usually super high in calories. So whenever you just bombard your system with calories and you get this surplus, well, your body is going to just go into this weird kind of situation where it's like, okay, I guess we got to store these calories, and we usually are going to do that in the form of fat. So then we're adding body fat, which is an inflammatory kind of process, and then there's inflammatory consequences to that as well. So it's just, these seed oils are a problem. Some practical strategies for minimizing these foods that we just mentioned. So we had the foods to eat liberally, we had the foods to eat in moderation, and now we got the foods to try to limit considerably. And some strategies to try to do that: just read the ingredient list. Okay, you got to just become a label reader. You want to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. You've always heard that more of the healthier foods are on the perimeter. You get through the aisles, you get into all the packaged processed foods. Choose whole single ingredient foods as much as possible, right? An apple, a banana, a potato. Those are whole, single ingredient foods. Try to cook your meals from scratch. Support your local farmers and organic producers for sure. Try to use cold pressed, minimally processed oils like extra virgin olive oil. And then you've probably heard of the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. If you haven't, just Google that. Those are usually the crops and whatnot that you don't need to eat. The Clean 15, you usually don't need to buy organic, right? And then the Dirty Dozen are the ones that you do want to buy organic, okay? Because they're typically sprayed with a ton of chemicals. But again, the key is progress, not perfection. You don't need to take all this stuff as, like I said, as gospel or anything like that. We're just trying to make incremental, sustainable changes, and this is just education to understand a little bit more about it. So that leads us to the next golden rule. So the next golden rule, number 4, control what you can control. Right? That's always a good rule. Control what you can control, work on your habits, and put your calories to work. The first principle within that rule is the 80-20 mindset, right? Let's call this strategic flexibility. And the 80-20, just, you're trying to eat CC-Spish 80% of the time, but 20% of the time, you're programming that in for flexibility to just live life. Right. If a fifth of the time, you can actually just kind of cut loose, try to do it with a better mindset and with a little bit more intuition. But if you stick to that kind of parameter, 20% of the time, you're just kind of, you're not really worried about it, then I think you're still going to be in a really good place. All right. Perfect is the enemy of good. So if you're trying to be perfect, a lot of times you'll be perfect for a certain amount of time and then boom, you fall off. And now you've gone back to bad as opposed to just trying to be good 80% of the time and not 100% of the time be perfect. Sustainability beats the strict nature because your willpower is finite and eventually it wears out. And then a lot of times people just go off the rails if they've completely exhausted their willpower. So the 80-20 principle, try to live by that. Try to eat as best you can 80% of the time. If you can go CC-Spish, if you can go calorie controlled, supplemented, Paleo-ish, that 80% of the time, you're going to be at a good place. Okay, how do we turn our intentions into results? Okay, we have to have goals and we have to have SMART goals. I love the acronym, the SMART approach, the SMART goals. That stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Specific meaning crystal clear objectives. Measurable meaning you can track it. You can track the progress. You have some sort of metric that you're actually measuring. Achievable means realistic. Okay, let's not try to do something in 2 months that is going to take 2 years. Okay, relevant, aligned with your core values and meaningful to you. So it's relevant to you, your context, your situation, your goal, and then time bound. Right? If it's not time bound, well, then sometimes you have a hard time of like, when do I measure what by when? Right? So you need a definitive timeline that you're trying to implement something. And a lot of times, if you can do it for a certain amount of time, you can create a habit out of it. Right? So the SMART goal process is what you try to take the habits and behaviors that would get you to that goal. And by doing it in a smart fashion, you're going to get there because you're going to create the habits that are required to get there. And there's some scientific kind of insights on this, that this approach specifically, the SMART goal system, usually increases your success probability of like 42%. So, I mean, that's huge. Okay. The next little subcategory in this whole rule here is to try to optimize your EHCs. I talked about your elemental health categories at length in previous podcasts, but your elemental health categories are how you eat, how you move, obviously how you eat, because that's what this entire podcast is about, but how you move, how you think, and how you recuperate are the other 3 EHCs. And these are your health fundamentals. So when you're trying to optimize these, specifically how you move, and when I say move, I'm talking, we need to do solid strength training. Strength training is like the buffer for terrible nutrition. And it's not a complete buffer. And you can't outwork a bad diet. You can't. But strength training consistently in a progressive way where you're actually challenging the musculature and you're putting it to work and you're forcing nutrients to have to be kind of like absorbed by your musculature is going to be a huge buffer for some of the nutritional slip-ups that we may have here and there. And if you're not strength training, you're just leaving a ton of your quality of life to chance. So trying to be solid with your exercise habits, strength training specifically, but exercise, cardio, your VO2 max is a very important longevity tracker. Cardiovascular activity, strength activity, I would prioritize the strength over the cardio, but I would also still be doing both. But you got to implement adequate recovery strategies, recovery nutrition. You got to understand how to best recover from intense workouts and progressive overload and actually give your body what it needs to recover so it can get better and it can rejuvenate. And that's really important too. The other EHC, so you got eat, move, think is another one, right? So trying to support your brain health as best you can and actually cognitively and consciously take control of your thought patterns. But from a physiology standpoint, we got to stay hydrated, eat nutrient-dense foods, great for the brain. You got to figure out what food strategy works best for you brain-wise too. And there's even some supplements that can be really helpful for brain health. I love lion's mane mushroom. Lion's mane's great. I take lion's mane every day. Omega-3 fatty acids, phosphatidylserine, Bacopa monnieri. There's a lot of different nootropics out there these days that, help kind of enhance your cognitive skills and your cognitive functioning. And I've done deep dives on that. I'll probably do a whole podcast on nootropics at some point because I think they're great. I love them. But, there's all kinds of ways to support your brain health and to help you think better and to help you just cognitively support your physiology. And obviously your supercomputer up here runs everything, right? So we need to support our brain health. We got to make sure we're giving it the appropriate nutrients. We're minimizing the toxins and then just overall recovery. So EHCs, like I said, eat, move, think, recoup or recover. And, sleep hygiene is huge. You got to have some sort of sleep routine, stress management, anti-inflammatory food, strategic supplementation to help support those other things. So it could be anti-inflammatory nutrients and those kind of things. Could be some sort of a sleep supplement that can be helpful. Magnesium's great. A lot of people take melatonin, glycine, and inositol. Those kind of things are all helpful for sleep. So do some research and figure out, how to best support your sleep so you can be getting good quality sleep, which I'm not right now because it's almost 2 a.m. and I'm still recording this. But we just got to take those things and try to build sustainable habits with those EHCs. All right, we're on to rule number 5. Golden rule number 5, commit, anticipate setbacks, and persist. All right, this one, I love this one because we're going to hit obstacles. We're going to hit roadblocks. We're going to hit challenges. And we can't go off the rails and give up. You only fail when you quit. Right. So if you give up because you messed up, that completely negates the entire process. This is always going to be a bumpy road, especially living in 2025. Right. We're bombarded by stuff all the time that's stressing our system multiple ways. And we need to do our best to optimize those EHCs and put in place, I guess, better nutritional and lifestyle habits to help buffer this stuff. So there's all kinds of obstacles that can come up. You can think about like the holidays and whatnot. Nutrition a lot of times goes off the rails. But there's all kinds of strategies for those kind of things. So specifically, if you have like a holiday event you're going to or something like that, or a big birthday party or something, try to eat a protein rich meal before, something low carb, protein high, protein shake or something. Use smaller plates, to try to control portion sizes. Fill half your plate with vegetables at those kind of little potlucks and get-togethers and those kind of things. Choose lean proteins as best you can. Limit alcohol as best you can. Focus on socializing more than eating. Stay hydrated with water. Pound water. Enjoy a small dessert mindfully. Okay. Don't just crush the dessert section. I know it's hard. Some of those desserts are good. All right. Take a walk. Try to get out and get active. Maybe take a walk with some your family or friends and stuff after you eat. And just try to practice mindful eating. Eat slowly, savor each bite, breathe. Don't just shovel food down your face like as fast as you possibly can. Social eating strategies, restaurants and whatnot. That's always a big thing that sometimes derails people's progress and whatnot. So, with restaurants, you can navigate the whole situation much better if you're doing things like reviewing the menus beforehand. A lot of times these menus are online now. Choose grilled options for almost everything, like grilled proteins. Ask for your dressings on the side. Share the desserts. Get a to-go box early so you can just put half your meal in there right away, and then you can eat the other half later. Drink water between courses and whatnot. Just like try to do the common sense things when you're eating out. Travel. Travel's another one. People hit these roadblocks because they have to travel. So, airports and business trips and planes, trains, automobiles, all these kind of things, pack your own stuff, pack protein bars, pack beef jerky, bring an empty water, bring nuts and seeds or something that you can snack on that's healthier. Try to research healthy restaurants and whatnot in the area or where you're going to be or where you're at. Sometimes that just requires a little bit of knowledge as far as understanding, what's in what. And once you get a little bit more awareness, you start to understand what restaurants have better options. But stay hydrated, limit alcohol, be careful with caffeine because you can go through all these kind of crazy ups and downs and then you crash and you think you need something. A lot of times you resort to food. But just have kind of this resilience mantra, right? Like progress is not linear. Temporary deviations do not completely define the process. So if you have some temporary setbacks or deviations or slip ups, just get back on the horse, man. Just get right back on it. And you can always, substitute. If you went crazy with your calories this day, you can just nip it and kind of cut it a little bit the next day. There's no harm in that. So there's lots of different options you got to try to build a little bit of an ecosystem around you that's going to be helpful, and that can be family, friends, loved ones, supportive, mentors or coaches and that kind of thing is really helpful. Okay. So we're getting to the end here and this is going to be a little ironic because I think to conclude this episode, one of the best things you can do is somewhat of a month or so of obsession. Okay. Now I know the entire podcast here, we were talking about like, hey, perfection is the enemy of good. And it's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent and sustainable and making these things a sustainable process. But if you're somewhat new to the game or you think you're eating pretty well and you just can't get the results that you're trying to get or whatever you're doing, I think a strict 2 to 4 weeks of almost manic neurosis around what you're eating will teach you so much. Now, this isn't something you're going to do forever, but it's an ironic learning experience here where it will teach you a ton. Okay. It will teach you a ton about what's in what to stay away from, what some of your habits and pitfalls are. I'm literally calling this little challenge the BB-FAM protocol, the Neurotic Bodybuilder for a Month protocol, right? You're going to act as if you're a bodybuilder and you have to be on stage in a month. You're going to track everything you eat for a month, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but shoot for a month. If you do this, the lessons that you will learn are unbelievable. And even though it's going to be super annoying, even though it's going to be super tough, you got to stay disciplined with your tracking. But even if you don't try to manipulate what you're trying to do, like even if you're not trying to go into a calorie deficit, you're not trying to do anything with your calories, you're just tracking it. You're just being aware. You're just looking at what's happening. A lot of these trackers will make you put in a goal, right? So what I would do is I would go and I would somewhat estimate your TDEE. There's a lot of calculators online now where you can do this. And you can just pop on there and you can estimate your TDE, which is your total daily energy expenditure. Okay. Now that is the calories out, right? So the calories in need to match that number to keep you the same. If the calories in are higher, you're in a calorie surplus, you're going to gain weight, even if it's at a very slow clip over time. If the calories are below that, you're going to lose weight, even if it's at a slow clip over time. Okay. Those calculators are not always accurate. Not even close a lot of the time. I did one not long ago and it estimated my TDEE to be 3250. I don't think I eat 2250 and I don't budge much. I don't go up. I don't go down. I stay about the same. So I think my maintenance calories are about 2200, probably around there, maybe a little higher, especially on like training days. But what I would do is take that TDEE calculator, see what it spits out. And then I would subtract 500 calories from it, 500 to 800 calories from it. And I would set that as your goal number. And then set your protein to get about as many grams per day as your lean mass or your target body weight. Okay. So let's say I'm 200 pounds and I want to be 180. I would set my protein to 180. All right. Let's say I'm 250 and I want to be 180. I'd still set it to 180. Okay. That's just a good general rule to get you started and just be meticulous. And it doesn't have to be forever, right? Just think about, hey, I'm just going to dedicate myself to this for 2 to 4 weeks. You can do that. A lot of times in that month, you will develop some habits and you will gain a huge amount of insight. as to what's coming in, what calories are in what, and how to navigate the nutritional landscape a little bit better. So now, after those 2, 3, maybe 4 podcasts that we did, you officially know more about nutrition than 85% of medical doctors. Okay. Say it confidently. It's unbelievable to me how many practitioners are dang near clueless when it comes to nutrition. So you're welcome. And I will see you next time.
Hey, I just wanted to add a quick little disclaimer and addendum here that reiterates that I am in no way saying to disregard any of your medical doctor's recommendations. Please consult them before making any drastic health behavior changes. Please keep them in the loop. Medical doctors have extensive training in their fields. The nutrition aspect is lacking, but they still are brilliant people, and I respect them to the utmost degree. Again, I'm just reiterating, you don't know more than your medical doctor because of these podcasts, but you have a better grasp on nutrition if you've grasped some of this stuff than a lot of them, okay? So once again, please do not disregard any of your medical doctor's recommendations because of these podcasts. All right, that's a wrap for today's episode of the Health is Hard podcast. I hope you found some valuable tips to help you on your journey to a healthier, more fit, more resilient version of you. Remember, building a stronger, healthier you takes time, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who could benefit from the goods that were in this one. Be sure to check out the show notes for resources and a special offer from our sponsor, Element X Health and Fitness. As a listener, you can get my free 83-page Chiro Companion Mobility Guide when you visit elementxhfc.com. That's Element X, H as in health, F as in fitness, C as in culture. If you have questions, suggestions, or just want to connect, find me, Dr. Matt, on Instagram and TikTok at Dr. E Health, DRE Health, and Twitter at DREX Health. Let's keep this conversation going. Thank you for being part of the health and fitness culture we're building together. Keep putting in the work, stay consistent, and cheers to making health a little less hard today.